Welcome back to the Deep Dive.
Yeah.
And we're so glad to have you here for this episode, by the way, brought to you by Safety One Source.
Mm-hmm.
You know, for all of you safety and risk management pros out there, I bet you know what I'm about to say. Staying ahead of the game is key.
Right. Absolutely crucial.
And there's this, one document. It's called the OSHA Field Operations Manual, or FOM for short.
Right.
And it's basically like it's like a cheat sheet almost for understanding how OSHA actually operates. Like you're getting a peek behind the curtain.
Yeah. Like a sneak peek into the playbook of the folks who come and do those inspections in your workplace.
It can be a little intimidating though, right?
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, if you ever actually sat down and tried to read through this thing.
It's dense.
It's massive. It's got over 90 references to other regulations and all these documents.
Yeah. I mean, it's got to be comprehensive, right? It's got to cover the entire landscape of workplace safety reg.
Okay, so imagine this. You're a safety manager and you want to be proactive. You don't want to just wait around and see what happens. You want to get ahead of any potential problems, right?
Right.
You want to be prepared.
Absolutely.
That's where understanding the FOM, I think, is crucial.
Yeah. It's not just about reacting to potential violations. It's about really using this knowledge to stop them from happening in the first place.
So it's like having a crystal ball almost.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
right.
Like you can see what OSHA's looking for before they even show up at your door.
Precisely. Let's say, for instance, that the FOM, it outlines a specific way that they're going to inspect a lockout tagout system. You can, do your own internal audit using their same criteria, find gaps. You can close those gaps before an inspector even sets foot in your facility.
I love that. It's like turning a reactive document into a proactive tool for building a really strong safety culture.
Exactly. It's about shifting that mindset.
Yeah.
From compliance to prevention.
Now, before we jump into all the specifics of how to actually use this thing, I think it's important to remember this was updated in 2019. Why is it so important to be using the latest version? What's changed?
Well, I mean, that's a great question. It's really important for safety professionals to be on top of those updates. For example, one of the big changes was to how they handle enforcement follow-up.
Enforcement follow-up.
Yeah.
I'm not sure I'm totally up to speed on that term.
Sure.
What does it mean?
That's basically what happens after they've done an inspection, right? In the past, follow-up inspections were kind of routine, but the 2019 update, it brought in more, targeted follow-up procedures. OSHA is more likely now to focus on employers that have a history of violations or operate in higher-risk industries.
Oh. So it's almost like they're trying to be a little bit more strategic with their resources.
Yeah.
Focusing on where they can have the biggest impact on worker safety.
Exactly. And that means, as a safety professional, you got to understand what those areas of focus are, you know? And especially if you've had past violations or you're working in a high hazard industry.
So the updates to the FOM have real world consequences for how we're actually doing safety in our workplaces. It's not just a theoretical document, right?
Absolutely.
Speaking of impact, I was kind of surprised to learn about the concept of state plans.
Right.
Can you shed some light on that?
Yeah, of course. So not all states operate solely under the federal OSHA regulations. Some states have their own OSHA-approved programs. They call them state plans.
So even though OSHA is a federal agency, there is some leeway for states to develop their own programs.
That's right. But there is a catch.
Okay.
Those state plans got to be at least as effective as the federal OSHA program.
Oh, so it's not a way to lower the GAR on safety standards, right? It's more like it gives them some freedom to tailor programs to the specific needs of their industries, as long as they meet or exceed the federal standards.
Well, exactly. And some states actually have even more stringent requirements than the federal program.
Oh, wow.
California's OSHA is known for that, stricter in certain areas.
So that means the FOM is really like a starting point.
Oh.
But you got to do your homework. You got to understand both the federal guidelines and your state-specific rules.
Absolutely.
Now, you mentioned earlier that the FOM can feel a little overwhelming.
Yeah.
With all the references, right?
Right.
Can you give a few examples of what we might actually find in there and why it's important?
Absolutely. So the FOM references, a really wide array of documents. You're going to start with the foundation, the Occupational Safety and Health Act of 1970.
That's the one that created OSHA in the first place.
Exactly.
Oh.
And then it references, specific standards for different industries. So construction, maritime, agriculture.
Right. So if I'm in construction, I'd want to pay attention to those.
Yeah, for sure. You'll also find, references to things like whistleblower protection regs.
Super important.
Absolutely.
We want to make sure employees feel safe reporting safety concerns.
Exactly.
Without fear of retaliation.
Understanding how whistleblower protection is addressed in the FOM, it helps you build that culture where they feel comfortable coming to you.
This is great information. And I'm definitely starting to see the FOM in a whole new light.
Yeah.
But something has kind of been bugging me.
What's that?
So if the FOM is like the OSHA inspector's Bible, and it outlines all these procedures for inspections and enforcement, doesn't that make it kind of inherently a reactive document?
Yeah, that's a really good observation. And it's a question that honestly deserves its own deep dive.
Well, listeners, we're going to take a quick pause here, but don't go anywhere. We'll be back in a flash to tackle that question. How can a document that's all about enforcement actually help you with proactive safety management? We're back with the deep dive, brought to you by Safety One Source, and we were just talking about this idea, right? The FOM, it seems like it's all about reacting to OSHA.
Yeah, about like what happens after something goes wrong.
Like a postmortem almost.
Right. But you're saying it's actually a roadmap for being proactive. So how does that work?
Well, think about it like this. The FOM, it shows you what OSHA cares about most. What's going to trigger an inspection?
Yeah.
What are they trained to look for?
Yeah.
It's all right there.
Okay, so instead of waiting for them to show up and tell us we messed up, we can use this thing and figure it out ourselves, like ahead of time, like a self-audit. Exactly using their standards?
Exactly. Like, let's say you're in manufacturing.
Yeah.
And the FOM lays out, step by step how they're going to inspect machine guarding. Well, you can take that section, walk your facility, and check your guarding against what they're looking for.
Oh, so if there are any gaps, we can fix them before they become violations. And even if OSHA never shows up, hey, our workplace is safer.
Exactly. It's a win-win.
Win-win. I like it.
It's about changing the mindset, from that fear of getting penalized to actually caring about your people.
And the FOM. Believe it or not, it can help with that.
Okay, now you've got me really intrigued. How does a big old document full of regulations actually help you change a company's culture?
It's the details. The FOM isn't just like abstract rules. It's full of descriptions of real hazards, real risks, how to control them.
So instead of just saying wear your safety glasses, it might actually explain the specific eye injuries that can happen in a certain job.
Exactly. And what kind of glasses will protect you from those things.
So all of a sudden, it's not just a rule. It's a real risk with real consequences that you can actually picture.
And when you present it that way to employees, safety training becomes, it hits home.
Yeah, it makes so much sense. Instead of just checking boxes, we're understanding the why.
Right.
And that makes us care more.
Exactly.
I'm invested now.
And there's other ways to use the FOM proactively, too. Think about budget stuff. If you need to justify getting new equipment or training, you can point to a specific section of the FOM that highlights, why it's necessary.
Oh, so instead of just going to your boss and saying, hey, we need a new fall protection system,
right?
You can be like, hey, look, the FOM clearly outlines all the risks of working at heights.
Yay.
And our current system doesn't cut it.
Exactly. Gives your requests more weight, shows you're not just being overly cautious, you're actually aligned with OSHA's own logic.
I'm starting to think every safety pro needs a copy of this thing, like highlighted, dog-eared, sitting right there on their desk.
Yeah.
But before we, hand out trophies, are there any downsides, like things to watch out for when using the FOM in this way?
Yeah, that's a good question. The FOM is great, don't get me wrong, but it's just one piece.
Right.
Don't get so lost in the weeds of the FOM that you lose sight of the bigger picture.
Yeah.
Building that overall safety culture.
So don't use the FOM as a crutch, right? It's a guide, not a replacement for actually thinking things through.
And remember, the FOM, it's focused on OSHA's enforcement side. You still need to stay up to date on all the applicable OSHA standards and regs, not just what's in the FOM.
Don't be afraid to call your lawyer.
Right. Oh,
especially if you've got a really tricky situation or you think there might be a violation.
Right.
Now, one thing about the FOM, I got to say, it can be, kind of a snooze fest. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah. It's not exactly a page turner.
It's basically a textbook
of
regulations. So how do you, keep yourself from getting bogged down in all the jargon?
One thing I do, I try to think of the FOM as a storytelling tool. Instead of just rattling off regulations, use real-world examples, you know?
Oh, I like that.
Okay.
So instead of just talking about ladder safety,
Right.
you could tell a story about, like, a near miss.
Exactly.
Where someone almost fell because they weren't using the ladder correctly.
Exactly. Makes the information stick.
Yeah.
Helps people connect with the human side of safety.
Right. It's not just rules. It's about people.
Exactly.
I'm really glad we dug into this. The FOM, definitely more than meets the eye, huh?
It is.
It's not just a reactive document. It's a tool we can use to build a stronger safety culture.
I completely agree. By understanding this thing, you can get a real sense of OSHA's priorities and use that to create a safer workplace.
Yeah, and that brings up a really interesting point. We've been talking about using the FLM to, like, stay on OSHA's good side. But what if we aim higher? What if we use it to go beyond just compliance and build a safety culture that truly puts people first?
That's a powerful idea.
Right.
Definitely worth exploring further.
Listeners, stay with us. We're going to dive into that very question when the deep dive returns. Welcome back to the Deep Dive, brought to you by Safety One Source. You know, we've been spending a lot of time with this OSHA Field Operations Manual. It's, it could be pretty easy to get kind of lost in the technical stuff.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
All the rules and regs.
It's a dense document.
But we've been hinting at something a bit bigger, haven't we?
We have.
This idea that the FOM can actually help us create a safety culture that goes way beyond just checking boxes.
Right, moving from that compliance mindset to care.
I love that, a culture of care. But how do we actually get there? How does a document that's basically all about enforcement help us create a workplace where people really value safety?
I think it starts with remembering that at the end of the day, the FOM is all about protecting people. It's about stopping injuries, preventing illnesses, making sure everyone goes home safe.
So even though it's written in this, like, very legalistic language, the heart of it is about well-being.
That's it. And if we can tap into that message, if we understand the why behind the rules, it can totally change how we approach safety.
Okay, so let's say I'm a safety manager. I'm reading through the FOM. What's one, like, concrete step I can take to shift my thinking from that compliance mode to care?
Ask yourself, what would OSHA want me to do to protect my workers, even if it's not specifically spelled out in the regs?
So it's about reading between the lines, finding the intent behind the rule, and then maybe even going a step further.
Exactly. For instance, the FOM might have, specific requirements about hazard communication, but a culture of care that goes beyond that, right?
Yeah, we'd be thinking about how to make sure employees actually understand the hazards, not just how to, like, stick a label on a container. We'd be making training programs that are actually interesting, relevant, not just going through the motions.
Right. It's about seeing your employees as people with families, lives outside of work, not just, numbers on a spreadsheet.
It's about recognizing their safety isn't just a legal thing. It's a moral imperative.
Absolutely. And when you look at it that way, it changes everything. How you talk to your employees, how you design the workplace, how you invest in training and equipment.
And even changes how you celebrate the wins, right?
Yeah.
It's not just about avoiding accidents. It's about recognizing and rewarding people for working safely.
Exactly. It's a positive feedback loop. Safety becomes part of who you are, not just something that's forced on you.
I'm really inspired by this conversation.
Yeah.
The FOM, it seemed like, kind of a dry document.
Right.
But we've really uncovered, like, a treasure trove of wisdom in here.
It's true. It's like we're using a legal document to learn about human safety and well-being.
And this isn't just for safety managers, is it?
No.
Anyone in an organization,
right from the top down,
can benefit from this mindset.
Absolutely. When safety is a shared value, it brings people together. It builds trust.
And you end up with a workplace where everyone feels valued, protected, and they feel empowered to make things even safer.
Exactly.
Well, this has been a fascinating deep dive.
It has.
We went from unpacking all the technical stuff to thinking about how the FOM can really change a company's culture. I know I've learned a lot today, and I hope our listeners have too. So you go back to your workplaces, take another look at the FOM. See it as more than just a rule book. See it as a roadmap to a safer, healthier, and honestly a more fulfilling work environment.
And remember, the journey to building that culture of care, it's a journey, it never really ends. It's a process of learning, growing, and always trying to do better.
Thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive, brought to you by Safety One Source. Until next time, stay safe and keep diving deeper.